So now on to our first speaker for the day. He is an ordained elder in the Philippines Annual Conference and works for the Reconciling Ministries Network. And our lovely and wonderful Reverend Izzy Alvaran talking about regionalization.
Thank you. So I think I have to use my pastor preacher voice because I need to talk to the end.
Izzy, people online say they can hear us well.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, if you can hear me, that is fantastic. If you don't, if I'm looking at you, then they'll probably think I'm not looking at them. So I'm looking at different places, but I will be looking at my notes, okay? Which I will share with you right now. So could I share my screen? Am I allowed to do that? Okay, well, I need to have the screen open.
Yes, you know.
And while that's being done,
You're up.
sometime last week, I heard a presentation on regionalization done by a member of the Christmas Covenant team, and is also on the strategy and communications team on regionalization by standing committee and Central Conference Matters, Connectional Table, and the Christmas Covenant. And he started off by saying, you know, we all live in one house and it needs a little bit of renovation. That's how he said it. And people sort of got it, especially if you're if you live with extended family, which is very common in the Philippines. So, you know, that is grandma's room. This is your room. This is your sister's room. This is the room of your parents, and these are your guest rooms. But we all share the bathroom. We all share, you know, the living room. We share the kitchen together. And he said, well, you know, we need a little bit of renovation so that we respect each other's space. And people, when he said it that way, people understood. And I know somebody also, they're trying to think of ways to communicate this. In other places, they say we live in one big village and we have a town hall where we all gather together. But, you know, that is the house that you go to if you want to get the best apple pie, right? Because they bake the best ones. Or you go to that place, who's a doctor if you want to get healed. But every other space, they have their own set of values that is true to them, but we all share a common space. And that's how they started talking about regionalization, at least in the context of central conferences, which are places outside the United States. So let me time myself. I'm given 30 minutes to talk, and then we will have a 15-minute Q&A. We will have 15 minutes of breakout. So even if you're on Zoom, we will break out into groups of 5 probably, and then we'll have a little bit of report back. Okay, so we want to talk about, give everybody some small space to discuss. So let me start that timer now. And let me share my screen. And you will have access to this document as well. So you don't have to worry. Okay, so it looks like people can see that, right? And I will just minimize that. Okay, so worldwide regionalization is a petition, a set of 8 petitions submitted by the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters in collaboration with the Christmas Covenant team, which probably a lot of you know. I convened this team. And in our audience here today, at least I know, okay, well, we have Richard Bentley, who is part of the Christmas Covenant team. We've been laboring at this for the last 3 years. And now it's been taken up and embraced by the agencies of the church, including the connectional table. So let's a little bit of definitions, because some people, you know, all of us who are engaged in this work for a long time and are like Methodist nerds, we tend to just suddenly go into the acronyms, right? So and people assume that people understand. So let's start off. BOD is the Book of Discipline, right here. Okay? Which is our book of law, doctrines, moral guidelines. This is our, this is our rule book, basically. SCCM, you'll see it later on, SCCCM, Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, is a permanent committee of General Conference. So they can meet in between sessions of General Conference, and anything that's related to central conferences, which are CCs, right there, Christmas Covenant or Central Conference, any region outside the United States is called the Central Conference. Okay, so anything that's related to regions outside the US, it goes through standing committee. I'm just trying to give you the most simplest explanation. Connectional table. Connectional table is, I would say, like an executive committee. Think of the church council in your local church, right? The connectional table is like the church council for the whole denomination. And they talk about the budget, they talk about the priorities of the church, all the secretaries, the secretary generals of our, or general secretaries of our agencies, the bishops are represented there. So in collaboration with the Council of Bishops, they drive the mission and vision of the whole denomination and reports to also us, the General Conference as well. That's the connectional table, or CP. GC is the General Conference, which is the highest legislative body of our church, meets every 4 years or special sessions as needed. And that's the one that's going to convene in Charlotte in April and May. JC could refer to jurisdictional conferences or the judicial council. So these are jurisdictions. Jurisdictions are regions of the church within the United States, and their role is mainly to elect bishops and also set the boundaries of the annual conferences, which are basically the same powers of central conferences, except that central conferences have a little bit more power to adapt to the local rules and laws of their countries, of their regions. Oh, I forgot, the Christmas Covenant team, or the Christmas Covenant, is the piece of legislation that the Christmas Covenant submitted. It's called Christmas Covenant because it was written around Christmas time of 2019 and submitted in early 2020. This is the first formal regionalization plan, of which worldwide regionalization has submitted. This is the template, okay? This is where we're starting with. AC is annual conference. RC would be regional conferences. USRC, the United States Regional Conference. Okay, so these are our main definitions. So if you have any other questions, you can raise it later. So the mission of the church in paragraph 120 of the Book of Discipline, again, this book, 2019 edition, the latest one, says that the mission of the church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. But then look at the second part. Local churches and extension ministries of the church provide the most significant arenas through which disciple making occurs. We have one big vision, but where does it happen? It happens locally. It happens in your neighborhood. That's how local and how regional it is, okay? Just to point that out. So I wanted to show you that we share one big vision, but how that translates to where you live, it's not even just the region. Even within one region, if you go to another town, they do things differently. Okay, we do share some very, very basic values, of which later on we'll talk about the social principles, which gives us the moral guidelines. Now look at this map. You will see here a map of the world where the United Methodist Church is located. I know it's a little bit small, okay, but you can see that we have, of course, the 5 jurisdictions in the United States. We have a central conference in Germany. We have 3 central conferences actually in Europe. So you have Germany, you have Northern Europe and Eurasia, you have Central and Southern Europe, and then 3 in Africa. You have Africa Central Conference, West Africa Central Conference, and Congo Central Conference, and then you have the Philippines. Now, how many people are in here? Okay, now here we go. Look at this map. And I'm thankful to Richard for always having this map available to us. This is from the 2016 data of GCFA, General on Finance and Administration, General Council on Finance and Administration. So maybe a little bit dated because a lot of people in this region of the church have disaffiliated. We lost 25,000, oh no, wait, sorry, 25%, almost 25% of our churches in the United States. I still don't know how many people that relates to because the churches left, but we have a lot of churches, a lot of members that stayed. And now they're shopping for another United Methodist church, or thank God they're planting new, fresh expressions of their faith. So this is how we are here. This is I think a lot of people left from South Central and Southeastern, so that must have shrunk now. Then we go to Europe, not really a lot, right? And know that the Russians are planning to leave, and there's a lot of other conferences in Europe, the Baltics that decided they're gonna leave as well. So they're gonna shrink too. The Philippines is at, close to 250,000 United Methodists. But look at the African region. That's huge. In Congo, it's like they have 3 million people, right? I think they have 3 bishops. Imagine that, four, okay, but still, you have 3 million United Methodists, you have 4 bishops. So, and then 1.5 in West Africa, which almost is like South Central or North Central jurisdiction. I'm showing this to you so you have a little bit of context of the spread of our denomination and why regionalization is important. Now, you're thinking, are we just talking about regionalization now because we want to solve current issues? Well, we've been doing this for a while now. So regionalization is not really a new concept for our church. We not as organized as we are doing it now, but we have bits and pieces from our history that we tried to do something related to decentering power, okay? Or decolonizing our structure. Now, in 1880, the General Conference decided to limit its own power by creating central conferences in the Methodist Episcopal Church back then. That's why we have central conferences. And then in 1924, the Board of Missions decided or proposed that, maybe the US, way back in 1924, they already were saying, maybe the US should also be called a central conference. To at least have the name be at par with the regions of the church. It was defeated. In 1928, although the US was unwilling to, give in to accept some structural changes, they said, we'll add some rights to central conferences. Now they could elect bishops. It used to be that all the bishops were elected at General Conference. Now they said, okay, central conferences can elect bishops where they are, but their power of bishops are still limited. In fact, one bishop from Africa, Bishop Niwatiwa, was reminiscing back in the day. They felt that they were second-class bishops when they attended the Council of Bishops meeting, because they didn't have the same, sort of gravitas as far as influence, I guess, is concerned. And then in 1939, this is when we all, after the split of 1844, a little bit of history because of slavery. In 1939, the Methodist Episcopal Church, or the Methodist Church then, was born and wanted to seek inspiration from central conferences and said, maybe we could also have some kind of regionalization within the boundaries of the United States. Remember, all United States related issues are being discussed where? At General Conference. Whereas central conferences can have, at least a limited degree, some kind of autonomy to, they can decide how they want to elect bishops, okay? In central conferences, you're not a life-term bishop if the conference, like in the Philippines, we used to have life-term bishops. Now every bishop they have to run every 4 years for re-election. Keeps them on their toes, but makes them too political, right? But they can do that. So they decided to have jurisdictional conferences And I think this, one reason here is because the southern jurisdictions didn't want to have somebody from the north elected bishop and assigned to them. Remember, fresh from the split, right? We don't want those northern, bishops. So they said, we will elect our own bishops, and now we have the jurisdictions. But they also instituted a central jurisdiction where all the black churches, all the African-American clergy are centralized in one jurisdiction, regardless of where you live.
Actually, Izzy, except in the western jurisdiction.
I didn't know that, okay?
No, it was still that way in the western jurisdiction.
No, but Pullman was always part of Cal-Pac.
Oh, it was part
Okay,
of the
well-
Cal-Pac, but not the it was part of the central jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you can probably, I don't know the history of like whether you're part of your annual conference, but in terms of, I guess, electing bishops, you go to your jurisdiction, which is not where you're located. But this was abolished in 1968, thanks to the Evangelical United Brethren folks who said, we're not merging with you if you keep this going. So it was abolished in 68. Okay, in the 1990s, one of our retired bishops in the Philippines, who became the president of the Council of Bishops then, challenged the church to become more global. I remember this because in the 1990s, I was of the camp for autonomy. We wanted the United Methodist Church in the Philippines to become autonomous. We were at odds with this bishop. He was talking about globalization. He was talking, we're a worldwide church and all of that. But we didn't really know how we're going to fit into that global church because he wasn't talking about how we have regions that have equal powers. And we still felt back then, oh, there's still privileges in the US. But he was already talking about this in his Episcopal address. And then in 1996, the General Conference created the connectional process team, which analyzed the structure of the church, brought proposals to GC that no region or continent should have more than 50% votes at General Conference, and the US should become a central conference. Not a surprise, in 2000, General Conference voted that. I'm pretty sure the Americans voted that. Like, we want to have our majority, we want to maintain that. So that didn't happen. In 2008, the General Conference received a report, again, proposing that the US become a central conference and to be globally renamed a regional conference in 2012. Constitutional amendments passed at General Conference, but they were not ratified by annual conferences. And we'll talk a little bit more about ratification later. In 2012, the General Conference received a study on the worldwide nature of the church. And then sort of this is probably a consolation because they didn't get what they wanted. You get paragraph 101 in the General Book of Discipline, which says here are adaptable portions of the Book of Discipline. And then paragraph 125, a covenant for worldwide UMC. And in 2012, that same General Conference mandated the Standing Committee to develop a General Book of Discipline. It's actually still in the ADCA, but what I heard from them is that they're sort of putting this on the side and let's get regionalization passed. And this work began following the 2012 GC, something that could be adaptable by central conferences. In 2016, the Standing Committee recognized that the US needed a way to do adaptable work, but felt it was outside of their mandate. So building on prior work by other groups and commissions, the connectional table then actually led this work, partnered with Westpac, which is our pension agency, on a way for the US to do the needed adaptable work and attend to US specific matters like its pension system by creating a US regional conference. That was the connectional tables legislation. In fact, it's also presented before this General Conference. The connectional tables US regional conference legislation. Now a little go back to 2019. Okay, you be forward. You know the drama there in 2019. Traditional plan was adopted. And then proposals for separation started. All these proposals for separation, dissolution, submitted to the 2020 GC. All of these petitions came from the US. Okay, just to note that. And then also in time for the 2020 General Conference, you have this US Regional Conference petition submitted. Also in 2019, in response to all these petitions for dissolution, a group of mostly Central Conference folks and some from the United States gathered together and said, well, these Central Conference voices were saying, we don't agree with the solution or splitting the church. That's a privilege that the American church they have. Like, why nobody's asking us? So they said, well, we need to propose our own. And when we learned that the Central Conference bishops supported the US Regional Conference, we said, why can't we use the template of the connectional tables petition to create a US Regional Conference and create regional conferences? Which is from the history of that we just went through, this has been attempted before. People are scared of that because they were defeated before. They passed at general conferences, defeated ratification. But we gathered together, and I would want to share this vision that was written by the Christmas Covenant team, because I think this is the vision that is still true, even now, even if we're like looking at another piece of legislation. We envision a church that connects globally, engages in mission together, respects contextual ministry settings, celebrates the diversity of God's creation in its many beautiful expressions, and values mutually empowering relationships in order to strengthen our core mission of evangelism, discipleship, and social witness for the transformation of the world. That is the vision of regionalization. I'm hoping that should be the vision that we are carrying forward. And this was submitted to the General Conference by the Philippines Annual Conference, Cavite, in early February of 2020. Now, we included in the Christmas Covenant the Connectional Tables US Regional Conference legislation. It's there. So it wasn't hard for them in 2020 to say, we affirm the Christmas Covenant as a vehicle for providing global regionalism in the UMC, because we actually have it. Now, from 2020 to 2023, we did a lot of good work, and I think this was noticed by people. We're still alive and standing, and now the other agencies of the church said, I think this is the way forward, and embraced it. And so the Council of Bishops, the Connectional Tables Standing Committee created a task force on regionalization. And we were asked as a part of the Christmas Covenant, well, we did go to standing committee, say, hey, will you affirm this, right? And now it became a template for worldwide regionalization, which is what we're also discussing today. So there's a QR code. If you want to go into the details, the weeds, actual legislation, you could use that QR code. This was submitted to GC late last year. It's a joint strategy and communications team is set up to promote this, which has participation from all the three stakeholders. Christmas Covenant team, we have 4 people there, connectional table, and standing committee. Okay, so you can scan that QR code, you also get this, then you get into that page on worldwide regionalization. Now, what are the values of regionalization? So I combined here some of the values that were brainstormed by standing committee in February of last year, and the values that were named by the Christmas Covenant team. So equity between regions and decentering the US, decolonizing our mission, relationships, and structure, respect for contextual ministry settings, agency, the power to make decisions and lead with integrity, self-determination within our connectional system. In the Philippines, it's kind of selling when you say autonomy, because there are still strong autonomy folks in the Philippines. In fact, it's being taken over by those who want to secede from the church, and they're using autonomy as the term, as the code word for disaffiliation. But we're talking about some form of autonomy or autonomy within the connectional system. In Africa and in the Philippines, stay UMC, no, I'm not talking to you, Siri. The focus is unity for our siblings in Africa and the Philippines. Stay UMC is their frame. So unity that is redefined and strengthened. Because I'm pretty sure in the US that might not be the case for some people. And because we are going to be doing work regionally, we can now focus on ministry and mission instead of being embroiled in a lot of our infighting. Stewardship of all gifts, meaning we all share the same gifts. There's a lot of people think, oh, if we split up, then are we not going to support other groups now because we're in different regions? Of course. We can actually now see what's your actual need. What's the surplus that we have? Or what gifts do you have that we don't have? We can work, but you can identify that in your region, and then we can also identify that in our region. And then definitely maintaining our consistent with our Wesleyan theological doctrine and our identity. Okay. What does it do? Some of the basic questions. What does it do? Well, it proposes 8 regional conferences. So we have 7 central conferences outside the US, right? They will become regional conferences. It's mainly renaming it and then adding powers. And then the US, since you don't have a US regional conference, there will be a US regional conference with the same powers. So you have 8 that will adapt portions of the Book of Discipline based on their context and their culture. What does it do also? It gives regional conferences the ability to legislate and establish rules and regulations for administration. Examples, you establish a regional Book of Discipline. You set the standards and qualifications for clergy and specialized lay ministers. You publish a regional hymnal with adapted rituals. Adapt structures adequate to your missional context and change the chargeable offenses and penalties. So you already see the scope of this is big. But then you all have that. It decenters the US how? Because a lot of our issues are discussed at General Conference because we don't have a central conference. And so central conference delegates get to be part of decision-making about US clergy pension. It's kind of weird, right? And a lot of other stuff. So we get to decide that where we are, and we're probably gonna have, instead of a 10-day general conference, have like a 5-day general conference, and most of it would be like a retreat. Because we're basically empowering each other about mission, talking about the good work that's being done, and a little bit of legislation. So, but this is what it does. What will not change? We will still have a general conference, so there's that connectional system is still there. We share in a judicial council. We have the same council of bishops and general boards and agencies. We will still share one constitution, the same doctrinal standards, which are the articles of religion and confession and faith, and our theological tasks, Christian ministry, and the social principles. These are not adapted. Okay, these are not adapted. What is its purpose? I'm using the flyer that's being given out by Connectional Table here. Focus on ministry and mission. I told you before, and I think for our purposes here, we've been talking about human sexuality a lot because we've been brought there. I'm not a gay clergy person, and I hate being used as a tool, as the instrument, like as a scarecrow. Oh my God, if gay people are taking over the church. It's been happening. It's really, really very, very old now. And we can't really do the work. Okay, and so hopefully, we're hoping that we settle this. This is something that you can discuss in your own. Okay, and then we can focus on what we need to do. Because it's really true. I read an article recently from somebody, a general conference delegate from Liberia, who's a part of the Christmas Covenant, Jefferson Knight. He's a layperson, he's a human rights advocate in Liberia. And he said, in Liberia, this is our situation around gay marriage and around ordination of gay people. He just said it straight. But then we need to address this because this is about mission work too. And then he pivoted to regionalization. We can have this. You can have your own policies, we can have our own. It's just a matter of respecting each other. I know some people are saying that too, that, well, that means we're allowing other regions of the church to discriminate. My membership is in the Central Conference. I really know that back home, we have allies, but culturally, we're not there. I know as a church, we're on a journey together. We're probably in the periphery, or I don't know where the center is. I don't want to say queer justice is always in the center of everything, because I know that immigrant rights also need to be there. Racial justice should also be there, right? But we all have our special projects and special things that we want. So we also hope that, I hope that we respect other people who are yet to experience their own Kairos moment, which is the God moment to realize that, what we're creating is a space for the Holy Spirit to actually change people's hearts and minds, and still allow us to do the work where we are right now. Strengthening our connection. We want to be connected together regardless of the regions of the church, whether you're in one region or the other. I'm very happy that I'm part of the United Methodist Church. I could go to different parts of this denomination and say, this church is my church. We might not like the cross and flame for some of us in the United States, but oh boy, we do love them in the Philippines. And in Africa, there will be gravestones with the cross and flame on it. There's that, because I was born in a United Methodist hospital. I went to United Methodist kindergarten, grade school, high school, and seminary. Some of us, we don't have that. So just remember the connection we have. Some of us have the privilege of not being part of anything United Methodist except going to a church. For some of us, it's our life. It gave life to us and our families. It allows us to stay together. And then local and equal decision making. I think that's self-explanatory. No region can impose its rules on any region. That's how I would say it. Decentralizing the United States. All US-centric legislation will now go to the US Regional Conference. Now the petition, and you saw the QR code earlier, you can go to that. It has 8 petitions. I'm just gonna, where you can find it in the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate, it's there. Petition 1 would be constitutional changes. This requires ratification. We're gonna go into that a little bit. I have a minute on my timer. I'm just gonna scroll through the 8 petitions. So if you want to see the constitutional amendments, use this QR code. Okay. And if you want to really go into the weeds, we can talk about it later or off Zoom. And I have a constitution expert here in this room. So petition 8 is the study petition, study further petition. Petition 1 has all the constitutional amendments, requires ratification. We'll talk about it a little bit. Petition 2 to 8 just requires simple majority. Petition 8 is a study to update and perfect the new regional conference structure to ensure equity between regional conferences. This also addresses the question whether regional conferences should have jurisdictions, including whether a US regional conference shall continue to have jurisdiction. It's up in there, right? Whether a process of arbitration or mediation shall be developed to navigate potential conflicts between regions. Other questions of equity in a worldwide church. So petition 8 is, once we pass this and ratify it, it still allows for continuing study to be reported and discussed at the next 2 general conferences. We have a special general conference in 2026, and then another one in 2028. In 2026, hopefully, we already have this ratified by then, and we have regional conferences. Ratification process, almost. General Conference needs to approve the constitutional amendments, petition 1, by a 2/3 vote at General Conference. We have 860, Richard,
860 something.
something, 860 something. So just do the math, 2/3 of that to pass the constitutional amendments, assuming that everybody gets to GC. Okay, but we're having visa issues from central conferences. I already know 4 from Liberia just got denied visas. Okay, and then as I said, petitions 2 to 8 can pass by simple majority. Then the amendments, assuming and claiming by the power of them, it passes a general conference by 2/3 votes. It is then sent to every annual conference in the whole world to be ratified by all the annual conferences by a 2/3 aggregate vote of all members present and voting. It doesn't mean that every annual conference will get 2/3. I mean, you add up all the members present and voting at all annual conferences, and you get the 2/3 of that. So if there are 1,000 annual conference members, it's too small. If you have 10,000 annual conference members around the world, you get the 2/3 of that. Okay, and then the Council of Bishops, probably by late next year, by fall next year, 2025, they will certify whether or not the amendments have passed by a 2/3 aggregate. I think, from what I'm hearing, the United States Annual Conference's meeting in June would not be able to ratify because according to the Secretary of General Conference, they don't have the, enough turnaround time to prepare all the materials for ratification. I also know the Filipino bishops already said they will ratify at their annual conference season, which would be in spring our time next year. So we will really not know until the end of next year. And then the Council of Bishops will certify it. And then the amendments to the Constitution, once it's certified, will take effect immediately. But this petition also allows for the US Regional Conference to start preparing for it. Once it passes, then you have a US Regional interim committee to start organizing the US. Okay, maybe they can even already meet. So let me close with a quote from Bishop Mande Muyombo, who's president of the Connectional Table and bishop of the Congo Central Conference and oversees the North Katanga Episcopal area, which is the largest annual conference in our connection and has the most number of general conference delegates, I think 66. That's their delegation. How many do we have in the West?
24.
The Philippines has 52. Yeah, we're kind of wise because we have more annual conferences, smaller annual. So Bishop Mande said, no region can claim to be the center and others the periphery. Jesus Christ remains the center of God's mission. And then my former bishop always said, Bishop Francisco, who's a co-chair of Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, what he likes best about this proposal is that no region can impose on the other, which is actually a good thing. So now, 15-minute Q&A. I think I went over by a couple of minutes. Good Lord, I spoke fast for somebody who's quarter time, maybe still sleeping. I just flew in from San Francisco. I left the house at 4 a.m. Okay, so any questions from, how do we do the questions from the floor and from Zoom?
Zoom, I'm monitoring.
Okay, so let me put a timer for
Can we
15
put the
minutes.
QR code up again?
Which one?
The one where we. Aren't they-
It was about the.
That one.
Constitutional amendments? They also have a printout here.
So it's 2/3 council, general conference and 2/3 of the whole annual or annual conference delegates.
You take all of the notes of all of it that happened, all of the 130 annual conferences, and you add them together. And 2/3
Okay.
of all of the votes are rounded together from all groups of the
To
annual.
get us on time, I'm putting 13 minutes for Q&A. Oh, there you go. Yes, please.
Hi, Izzy. I don't know if I missed this because I was doing some other stuff for a minute. Did you tell about what happened at the 2016 General Conference right at the end? Because I thought that, do you remember how it was the Africans who defeated that thing by just a little bit? And what a disappointment that was to so many people.
Is this 2016 or?
That's 2008.
I can't remember. I wasn't at the 2008 General Conference in Texas.
Wasn't that 2016?
That's 2019.
2019 is the traditional plan. Yes, and I will not, for the record, claim, and nobody can claim that the 54 vote difference were all African votes.
Okay.
Please, yes, exactly. No,
Did you explain that? Because that was amazing.
Well, if you didn't go through that trauma and then have to go through therapy, good for you, right? But for some of us, 2019 was like the church saying, you're already bad in a bad place, but we're just gonna keep, put our foot down your neck as a queer person, because it made it harder for allies to support us. It made it easier for those who don't support us to get rid of us as queer people. That's the traditional plan, right? And every time when who you are is on the agenda to be voted upon, that's already traumatic, right? And then for us to lose by 54 votes, and I cannot really simplify that, because the debate then was the one church plan, which was, and some people are equating the one church plan with regionalization, which is actually not true, because one thing, the regionalization plan that we have here does not change anything in the book of discipline, whereas the one church plan does change, makes it all neutral, takes out all the harmful language and all of that. And it was pitted against the traditional plan, and perfect, of course, we didn't get that by 54 votes. Now, are all those from central conferences? Of course not. I have siblings who said, we will not support the one church plan because we will support the simple plan, because the simple plan does not have any compromises. And I was told that I was selling out because I was organized. I said, friends, I said, my fellow queer siblings, I'm with you there, but I'm an organizer. Tell me, how am I gonna get votes in central conferences for the simple plan? You don't have a plan. If you want to die on that hill, I'm not gonna join you there. My membership is in a central conference. I'm trying to get, they said, but you're throwing them under the bus. Of course not. I said, if we do this, all of them will leave. My connection with my central conference will be gone, right? And then the chances of them experiencing and enjoying what privilege we have here in the United States as queer people, they will not have that. I'm in for the long game. And you're only seeing, we want this now. I said, then you're the one throwing my people under the bus, because you're forcing them out without any plan on how to keep them engaged.
Izzy, can I add?
Oh, let's get Paige and then you.
Well, no, I want to say,
Yes.
and from listening carefully to delegates from outside the United States, I can tell you that were delegates outside the United States that voted for the one church plan. So to say that everyone in Africa or the Philippines was in this, that's not true either. So it's what happened was far more complicated than it's been portrayed.
That is true.
So my question,
Yes.
I think, is a reasonable segue, because I was gonna ask, like, what is, so 2/3 of 860 some odd votes, what's the current advocacy thrust, the whipping mechanism, and what's the role of our Cal-Pac delegation in whipping? this?
Yes, so if you see the prompt question is, what do you see are challenges to pass regionalization? We want to hear from you. I don't have a crystal ball right now. And then what can you do to help pass regionalization at general conference and ratify it? Of course, we're working with delegates in it, that has to happen now or has been happening already. The good thing is the Christmas Covenant team has been doing this groundwork for 3 years, right? And so now I think the general agencies of the church would need to learn how to do grassroots work. Okay? And I can say that. I can say that because for some people it's easy as, let's put up a website and it's all there. No, you have to do you need to build relationships. You need to talk to people. And sometimes it's like pulling nails. But that's how you do coalition work.
So I know you're a good.
Yes, yes.
What are the sticking points right now that?
Well, okay, so I didn't put the slide on concerns. There are some concerns from our racial justice caucuses, racial ethnic caucuses, saying, oh, this will further divide the church and that we will be all separated. That's actually not true. Because we are decentering power. But I think what they're trying to say is, will this siphon off resources for racial ethnic caucuses in the United States? It just forces not. In fact, I think our racial ethnic caucuses will then have the opportunity, because they're all US based, to start building relationships with people in the regions from this region. Also the concern about mission is, are we not supporting Africa anymore? I think that was that question. Well, no, we're still gonna have the same general agencies. That's not gonna change. What we're saying is we get to do a lot of legislation locally that will be rooted in our own context. While this piece of legislation does not really do away with the harmful language against LGBTQ persons and our allies, it does give regions the power to craft policies that's based on their context. That's why the conversation later with the social principles would be very important, because it provides moral guidance.
So that's a sticking point for some people. They were hoping that the legislation itself would include the more inclusive language. And you're saying this is the,
Some people who are more progressive siblings would probably, why is it not included there?
okay.
I think I've heard it from some Europeans saying, we're done. If you don't really change this, we're done. Why is it not here? Well, because this is a decolonizing plan. I always tell my friends, I said, the first bold step for LGBTQ justice is to decolonize the church structure, because you're operating from an intersectional justice frame. If you don't look at this issue from that frame, then we're gonna be in silos. And I tell people, look at me. All you see here is I'm gay. Yes, because I'm a professional homosexual. I do this for my work. But I'm also an immigrant in this country. I was a political refugee for how many years? For 10 years before I decided, oh my God, my green card is expiring. Might as well get citizenship because Trump is president, right? English is not my first language. I wasn't born here. That's why I don't do a lot of the games that Americans play, like where you guess things, because I didn't grow up here. I don't know pop culture here, right? And I get corrected for my accent or maybe wrong grammar. If I said, well, do you speak my language? You don't. I try to speak yours. So if people don't see this from an intersectional justice frame, then that's a problem. This is what this piece of legislation is about. It's our first audacious step to take the whole church out of having segregated conversations to say, this is how we do church. But it's hard when we can't respect where people are. And I'm saying, if we have a regional conference structure that allows, yes, conferences in the Philippines, I could speak for the Philippines. They will be a little bit more conservative. They'll say, in the Philippines, we can't have same-sex marriage because they don't have same-sex marriage laws anyway. We will not have self-avowed practicing homosexuals. I'm out there, they know I'm self-avowed, but I'm not married, so I'm not giving my bishop any problem. But they also can't do that there, because which church will give you an appointment if you're publicly out there? All of my clergy siblings who are gay there and deaconesses are all in the closet. More of the lay people are out. In Africa, they could kill you if you say, like, I'm gay in Uganda and I want to be clergy. Of course, they're not going to have those policies, but moving forward and focusing on mission, I think there's that template for the Holy Spirit to work, because we get to meet each other where? In the mission field. And I've always given this example. Imagine somebody from a reconciling church in the United States, gay clergy, with maybe a couple of lesbian couples there with their children, going on a mission trip, digging a well somewhere for clean water. And if you're in the Philippines, we'll probably invite you for dinner, right? Or you're painting my church, right? And then if I would be talking to my fellow church members, oh my God, there's a gay couple that's going to be in my place for dinner tonight, but they're digging a well for our community for clean. What am I going to do? That conversation around the table is where the Holy Spirit will go. And I always tell people, I don't have the power to change people's hearts and minds. That's not my gift. It's not my superpower. That's the power of the Holy Spirit alone. What we're being asked is to be present and provide that space. The palette, the blank palette for the Spirit to say, oh, let's see, these people are gonna meet in the context of building the mission of Jesus Christ. I'll give you an example, more concrete. Bishop Cedric was in the Philippines with the other new bishops, because they were being introduced to the work of global ministries, the General Board of Global Ministries. They went to the hospital where I was born, Mary Johnson Hospital. And he texted me, because we were texting, I'm in your country, and then with his husband, Christopher. The current director of that hospital is pro GNC. Okay? Pro GNC. I don't know him personally, but that's what I'm hearing from people. But he was there with him. Here's a bishop, gay bishop with the husband. I'm pretty sure there was tension there, but I don't know. If you suddenly somebody sees someone in the flesh that you've been maligning in your head, and hearing that person speak and meeting the spouse and their visions and dreams, I don't know. The Spirit might be doing something. Not only that, he said all the gay nurses and other people there started coming to them and thinking, thank you. But if we don't have this and we just say, we want our way, F the whole church, which is a privilege that Americans usually want to have, and say like, oh, we're leaving, we're packing up, we're gone. Then my folks back home, that's gone. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't.
I thought I got into a soapbox here, and I think we're supposed to be in a group, breakout groups.
So the mediation, possibility, that was part of the previous slide, I think. Part of the working group would establish a mediation tool between regional conferences, because it could be that the GMC
Yeah.
head of hospital in a different conference says, I will not receive Bishop Cedric and Christopher. Right? I will not. And I'm in a different conference. And that is not a judicial council lawsuit. That is a mediation issue. So you see those sort of things coming down.
Yeah, so
That
in the
could happen,
study, they
right?
would have to have a conversation
So we
about.
can't block the
Right.
kinds of relational spaces and moments that you are describing
Yeah,
persuasively. But that's the kind of thing that. people-
between regions, you mean?
Between regions,
Yes, yes, I can answer that, but we had that conversation.
As I understand this, if you are ordained in one region, you are ordained in all regions.
Yeah.
So the different regions may have different standards, but we will recognize the ordinations and the bishops of every region. That is not a choice, and that's not even a mediation. That's in this. So what the
That's in
picture
there.
Izzy is lifting up is accurate. Folks who are ordained in the US are clergy all over the world. The folks that are ordained in Africa or the Philippines are clergy all over the world. We would have mutual, and there's no option for a region to not recognize an
Well, you know,
an ordination.
We already adopt, those, policies because, again, in the Philippines, we have indigenous people who've never been to formal schools. But we get to ordain them because they go through a course of study. They don't have college degrees. But they're effective in their mission work, like any other elder.
I mean, I was just thinking, I liked your vision, right? So that reconciling Church A of Los Angeles, we're gonna go do a well in Philippines, right? To have those relational moments. But
That's what I'm hoping
regional
we're creating.
regional conference bishop hears, oh, this is reconciling Church A, I'm gonna say no.
It's more complicated. The bishops generally don't have an ability to block a mission project. They might share that they wish you didn't do it. There are some things we do where for one bishop to go to another Episcopal area, even in the United States, the bishop in the receiving area has to say yes. Just like if somebody's gonna do clergy work in my local church, they need my blessing to do it. I mean, that's gonna still be there.
That's still good. I think that's still one of those, birth pains.
Right, I
of
was
this
just trying to think, what would need to be mediated, and then when you started talking, I was like, oh, okay, that might need to be meeting.
Oh, the
Yeah.
arbitration, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
they-
there, yeah, I mean, some people would probably want to do, I mean, we're refining some of the language also around chargeable offenses.
the other-
Sure.
Yeah.
The other complexity is that we would be moving to a Canadian model of constitution. And there will be stress between regional conferences and general conferences and who does what.
Mhm.
It'll be more complicated.
Yeah.
Here and then in the back.
So, oh, you that's in your.
Oh.
I just wanted to ask what role all this plays in the disaffiliation of 25,000 churches in the United States. This
Okay.
will play a role.
Okay,
That kind of speaks to my question.
Okay.
So I transferred to Cal-Pac several years ago from Alabama Westward Conference, which was completely torn apart by disaffiliation. And for most of those churches that stayed, for them to stay was a huge fight. So their churches are just now starting to rebuild, and everyone feels like everything has been changed. Are we having the right conversations so that our delegates from the Southeast in the US are gonna be ready to take this vote? Because that, from what I hear back home, so many people are having to rebuild, so many people, whole sections of their conferences are being restructured and, I worry. I was at the 2019, and we were not ready to have the right conversation. Well, I'm curious.
so on the matter of disaffiliation, just to answer, you, that ended at the end of last year. Right? Ended last year, but there are petitions to extend it, one, or to make it permanent in the book of discipline in the United States, and or allow central conferences to go through a disaffiliation. And they're using the term fairness. If the Americans had a chance to disaffiliate, give them a chance to disaffiliate. Now, who are the ones saying this? Americans are saying, right? But then you have to ask the folks in Central, do we want that? The reason why we started the Christmas covenant in the first place was because we were against any of these petitions to divide the whole church, because we were looking at mission work together. We are better together. And so ask us, do we want it? Then ask them. I know from the Philippines, nobody would want to do that. There's a small group of people pushing for secession, outright autonomy. In fact, some of the GMC churches, they are just outright taking property and pushing our people out the door. It's their church. But some of our bishops probably a little bit more, we don't want to file suits, and it's gonna go to court eventually. In Africa, you heard them when they met in Dar es Salaam recently, the United Methodist Africa Forum. All these are mostly African delegates, probably 150, 160 of them said, we don't like this affiliation. Don't bring it to us. There are already ways for people to leave the United Methodist Church, and that's also true for the Philippines, or say they can use that to leave the United States. Don't, you have the privilege of giving them your properties. We don't have that privilege, and we don't want to give anybody that privilege to take our properties. Yes.
I just think it's kind of important to understand that the GMC is actually not part of the United Methodist Church
Anymore, yes. They're all there.
They call themselves Methodist, but they're not part of this conversation anymore. They did their own thing. So if the church joins them, they're no longer bound by any of this.
Sure.
So,
I'm just thinking about all the.
GMC can't prevent the United Methodist Church from doing anything in an
Oh.
area where the United.
Oh, they
Methodist
are.
Church-
They are doing that right.
Well, they are, but
I
they,
mean,
but you don't need the permission of a GMC church to send a mission to an area that needs it within the United Methodist.
oh, of course, yeah. But are they trying to sabotage this project?
course
Of course they are. I mean, we hear it from our siblings in Africa, in the Philippines. They're putting in a lot of money. That's why I thought that maybe the African conferences would want to ratify next year, so they'd have more chances of really doing grassroots education. I heard from one person saying their GMC is pouring a lot of money to confuse us here. We would want to ratify ASAP. If they could do it in June and July in the North Katanga Episcopal area, they would want to do it. I said, well, but I don't know if we're allowed to if we have the materials. Right? But they are doing this. But also some people are already pointing out in Africa, whoa, this is Andy Emmanuel, a delegate from a GC delegate from Nigeria. He pointed out that the GMC has a regional conference structure. So it's good for you, but not good for us. Because that's what they're saying. We're not going to support that. They're attacking regionalization. The African Initiative, Jerry Kula saying that. But then he ended his talk with the Indiana delegation and said, but we might support regionalization if you allow this affiliation in Africa. Yes.
I think, kind of piggybacking on what you said, how does disaffiliation affect apportionment and viewpoint? Does the Alabama North Florida Conference have the same number of delegates as it did in 2016 or 2019, despite the fact that most of the conference has disaffiliated? If it does, are the delegates of the same viewpoint that they were 8 years ago?
I'm just thinking about those critical conversations that need to happen.
Yes.
The votes were so small that made the difference in 2019. And then we got home from 2019 and Alabama, West Florida had their annual conference and they immediately accepted
Okay.
all of the traditional, because progressive people that were there, unfortunately, act of God, had just had huge hurricanes come through and destroy their churches, like physically. So they were dealing with so much that when they came to the table, some of them couldn't make it. So I'm just thinking about regions of our country that have been ravaged by disaffiliation. Are we making sure those delegates are ready to
Okay.
come to the table?
So yes, the United States annual conferences will vote to ratify in June of next year. And not, I think we had enough lead time to get there.
Okay.
The immediate need right now, and that's why we're focusing on GC delegates. All 5 jurisdictions in the United States at the last jurisdictional conference in 2022 endorsed the Christmas Covenant or regionalization in general, right? I think we got that covered in we have 55% of GC are US delegates, right? And there are some, probably not over 20, who are still staying but are GMs. Okay? 2019 is a different question than what we have right now. I can tell you why, from a central conference perspective. In 2019, the question was, are we gonna have gay people take over this church? Or at least, are we giving them the rights that they need to have? Those who are coming from context that, well, we don't want that, because right at that point, it was across the board, right? They won't even touch it. And even now, if you give them a chance to vote publicly, they would have to vote publicly, because otherwise they would go home and be attacked. You know, and said, oh, you voted to support gay people? That's even a crime in some places, right? So that was the question then. The question now is, at least from a central conference perspective, are you staying UMC or not? That's the strategy we're framing,
That's what I want.
but also that's the frame they actually are operating from. The Filipinos and the Africans are stay UMC is the first conversation. If you're stay UMC, let's talk about the future of the UMC, and they say regionalization is my future. For the American church, it's a different framing. You want to take the harmful language out? You want to do gay marriage and do all that? Regionalization. It's a different framing. A little bit more. Well, I've been here for 20 years and I just became an American citizen in 2020. There's a lot of like, what do I get? Me, right? There's a value here, I think. I mean, there's a positive value, but where I come from, it's like, oh, well, we're talking about my whole community. The whole community is the value. Right? I'm not saying that we're not good. Okay, I'm down to I'm gone. Okay.
Got 20 minutes.
Okay, I have 20 minutes. I don't know if we have time for a breakout, or are there questions online?
There have not been any questions I've seen online.
Okay, well, you know, when people don't ask questions, it's either they really got it or they're just not interested anymore. Now, I would want us to have a conversation about ratification and your commitment to ratification, because that's the heavy lift. A lot of us, I don't know who's here, who are general conference delegates. The immediate need for general conference delegates is to make sure your delegation supports. And if your delegation has a relationship with general conference delegates from other places, whether here or abroad. Make sure that you talk about this with general conference delegates, because we need to get to those. But also know that we've been doing our part in central conferences. And we've been getting a lot of support. In November last year, well, it started out in April of last year, where United Methodist Africa Forum gathered in Johannesburg to start off. In the Philippines, we had a gathering of central conference general conference delegates in the Philippines. And we had our version of the connectional table in the Philippines endorse regionalization because it was presented to them. You know, and it was overwhelmingly supported. In the US, we had 4 of the 5 regions endorsed, 5 jurisdictions endorsed. Now we want to get to that magic 2/3 number.
Okay, we do have a question online, is it?
Yeah.
Caesar, if you want to, Reverend Caesar,
Oh, Caesar?
you can unmute and you should be able to speak.
Oh, that's Caesar?
Oh, sure. Hello, everybody. This is Caesar
Hi,
Lodia from
Well,
Wesley
introduce
Theological.
yourself, Caesar.
Oh, thank you. Okay, this is Caesar Lodia Coca from Wesley Theological Seminary, and I'm also a delegate to the General Conference for the first time, representing our Kasai Annual Conference. So,
What conference in Congo?
Kasai Annual Conference. Okay. So this will be my first time to be part of the General Conference delegates. So first of all, I would like to appreciate the leadership being provided by Reverend Israel. We know each other for a long time since I came to Washington, D.C. in 2022. And I can see that Reverend Izzy is an amazing person that I'm so proud of your leadership, and you're still inspiring me to follow what you're doing. So I don't have much to say, but I was wondering because I thought like this meeting was going to bring together even folks from Africa, but I'm a bit surprised to see only folks from the US, which I do understand that it was based on the American perspective. Anyway, all I know, I've never seen such a things being done in Africa. So what can we do in order to make things happen in Africa as well, where we can bring folks together, explaining some of the stuff that should be done during the General Conference? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Caesar. I'm counting on United Methodist Africa Forum to do that.
Okay.
When the Christmas Covenant team started, we decided on a number of organizing principles. Because we were from Africa, the Philippines, Europe, and the United States. And one of our organizing principles was, or it still is, that local people organize local people. We don't parachute in from another region unless invited, and we are gonna do this work together. So yes, the context for today is for this annual conference, Caesar, but I'm glad you're here. So I'm speaking to a specific audience of folks. If I'm talking to Filipinos, it would be a totally different framing, right? We did that in the Philippines last November. But I think for ratification, we need to really go back. But we're doing some of the work with the support of course, our bishops in the Philippines support this. So the other 2 days ago, one of our team members on regionalization presented before all the clergy, church leaders, church workers, and deaconesses in the Davao Episcopal area on a lecture on regionalization. Because all of the annual conferences, they already endorsed regionalization from a couple of years ago. So now we're working on other annual conferences. In the last 24 hours, there's a conversation of our regionalization team on chat saying we need to, assuming we're passing this at General Conference, right? Because that's the first thing. But they're already thinking of ratification. They said we need to have at least 2 presenters from each annual conference, and we have 25, 26, to be part of a speakers bureau. And they're saying, we're gonna ask the bishops to submit names of a lay person and a clergy person I can then train to go through a slide presentation on regionalization, and then they can translate it in their own language and do the groundwork until we actually ratify it. And then our fellow organizers in Africa would need to also do this. So at some point before general conference, we would have to gather delegation leaders, delegates from all regions of the church to sit down and say, what's the floor strategy at GC, and what's the ratification strategy. So I like the fact that Cesar is holding us accountable, because that's also something that we need to be doing, is to let people know that I'm organizing for general conference. And usually, because of the privileges of being in the United States and the conference being here, plus all the technologies available to us, we tend to be more like, we're the one that's organizing the strategy. But we need to have general conference delegates from other places be at the table and not be told after the fact. Right? So for example, if there are general conference delegates meeting from the United States to get their act together and there's some strategy going there, I would not want to go to general conference delegates in Africa and the Philippines and say, there's been a meeting and this is the plan. I would not want to do that. So I would rather say, they met, here's what they think is good. What do you think? Because you're all gonna be at the Florida General Conference. You're gonna see each other from afar, or at least you can caucus on the side, like, hey, we plan A, plan B, what's the next plan? I would hope that would happen. Because if we want regionalization, we need to live into it right now, even as we strategize. In that way. But we always do that part where we have this conversation and then suddenly, oh, we want to hear a little bit from central conferences. Like a token. Let's not do it. Please, let's not. But I stand in the center of all of this as an organizer. That's stuff. And being that bridge. And there are people who always want to keep me, on my toes and honest. And I like that. It's hard. I'm just telling you how it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I mean, there's a lot of things there. That's why there's a lot of race involved there, right? Thinking that, oh, they probably don't know how to strategize, or a lot of mistrust. They screwed us last time. I keep telling people, no. There were progressives there who didn't want to vote for this because they were going to die on that simple plan hill. Some of them already left. The UFC. These are my siblings, so are progressive, we're clergy too. And some people say, why are you still there? I'm thinking of my folks right now. That's why I'm not moving my membership to any conference in the US. Even if my bishop is teasing me right now. When are you moving your conference membership? Because I'm being used by the conservatives in the Philippines. See, you have a big clergy person. I told my bishop, you're not going to make me move because I want to rabble rouse you. Keep you honest. So, are there any other questions? I have 10 minutes. I think we're not going to have a breakout, are we? But so if we're not going to have a breakout, I'm going to have a little bit of pitch, which we'll later hear also from you. You can do a lot to help. If you're a general conference delegate, study the piece of legislation. Think of what needs to be tweaked, right? Make it better. Talk to other delegations. That's the first thing that we need to do. If you're an annual conference delegate, you're a clergy or a delegate to your annual conference, or you want to be a delegate to annual conference, and make sure that you show up at that meeting where you're elected. Study this once it's ratified at general conference, because it's going to come your way. And then as stewards of this kind of gatherings in your annual conference, make sure that you get the most number of votes when you ratify. Because we want every vote. I don't know what the strategy would be in central conferences. We would want to hear from them as well. But we're going to start counting votes, right? And for some of us who are not, some people say, well, I'm not a delegate, I'm not doing anything, but you can still support. We need to have, I'm gonna give you a challenge. Right now in Liberia, where Africa Initiative is, we have people there who are being present at their annual conference, riding motorcycles, going to the boonies to talk to local churches and districts. Now, how many districts? They have 50 something districts, 15 districts in Liberia. And they were at their annual conference with a big tent outside the state UMC, and became like a hospitality space. They don't have money for that, friends. Am I asking money? Yes, I am asking money. Because that's the privilege we have. I tell people, like, aren't we different from other people? Like, that we always accuse, GMC that they're buying. You're not buying votes. Because you're not dictating their agenda. They are. That's the first thing. That's why I said, I'm not afraid to ask money, because some people are going, oh, we should be very careful. No, that's their agenda. They dictate who gets to be doing what and where. They're just asking for our resources, because they don't have that. And as an ally, and I know this, of course, as a queer person, a genuine ally is not someone that's gonna come and save me, but recognizes that I'm already doing the work. And will open the door, because they have that privilege to be able to open the door, but they're not coming up on a horse, is that, trying to save me. Because my community is already standing up to do this, whatever you can do. And we have this work that's gonna happen in every annual conference, here and abroad. So the education, the travel, the organizing, and of course, we're gonna try and squeeze every general agency as well. Like, they gotta pony up money. I think once this is ratified, then I think the funds will. I mean, once it passes general conference, I think that's when we can hold everybody accountable. Now, the hard. Because if you're gonna ask me, well, if this fails, I'm not even gonna go there. But whatever gains we have at this general conference on issues that are close to your heart, like taking out the harmful language and all of that, without regionalization, that's 10. Because that could change in 4 years, when the United States is no longer holding a majority of votes, but also that's operating from a place of fear. If you have relationships in different parts of the world, hopefully that doesn't have to be the problem. But I'm just saying. Anyway, I will end there with that pitch.